Ian, you've been watching Dominic Raab face the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. What did the Beach Boy have to say for himself?
Oh, absolutely fuck all. So it's just this absolute wall of blather and evasion and truisms that once you kind of get the technique, it just you just feel your heart start to shrivel up inside of your ribcage. Because you feel, you hear it from ministers all the time, right? Like they know how to do media interviews, and he's probably the most grotesque version of this. Which is they know, you go on Radio 4, you go on LBC, whatever, you got 6 to 8 minutes. That's not a lot of time to kill by just warbling on with an absolute load of bollocks. So they'll have a question. It's quite hostile. They say, I don't accept that at all. Then they'll use a bridging phrase, something like, but, taking it, looking at it in the round, or the other thing we haven't thought about. And then they just talk about whatever the fuck it is they want to talk about for 2 or 3 minutes an answer. And they just eat up the time. Now, this is the thing that sort of interviewers on radio stations, on TV shows find very frustrating. It's actually very hard to deal with, despite the amount of shit that people give them online. That's basically what Raab just tried to do for a 90-minute select committee hearing. So he basically filibustered his own foreign select committee hearing. He just went on and on and on, dealing in truisms and generalizations and refusing to engage with even a trace element of specificity, up to and including being asked the question, on what day did you go on holiday? And he wouldn't even answer that.
Yeah, but that thing, the bridging phrase, my daughter has been learning that you have to do that before you change the subject. So she just goes, speaking of which, and then introduces a new subject.
How did you allow her to learn this?
Speaking of which would allow her to put on a creditable performance in front of a select committee, I think.
That is brilliant.
Was the questioning adequate, confronted with this fiendish tactic? Like, who performed well? Did anyone manage to sort of get through to him?
Well, Tom Tugendhat is the Tory chair of the committee, and he asked a lot of specific questions, got no answers in reply. I think there's a lot to be gained in terms of emotional reassurance by just looking at the way that he looks at Raab, because he looks at him with a kind of cold fury that sort of sheds if only this problem could be solved as easily as one on the battlefield. So at least there's that, where you get the sense of his eyes communicate some of the outrage that you yourself feel looking at it. Chris Bryant and Neil Coyle, both Labour MPs, very, very good. So was the SNP's Stuart MacDonald. They didn't really, there's only so much you can do. There was a crucial moment which Raab gave away by mistake, really, where he talked about why it was hard to get British nationals out of Afghanistan. And what he ended up saying was, well, the thing is, sometimes there's these families where one of them's a national, but some of the others haven't got the paperwork, or we're not sure the paperwork's right. And what he meant by that was, we just wouldn't fucking take them. That's the reason they're still there. And that there gives you, I think, a very good indication of the kind of moral decision making that was going on in government, even here, where they're thinking, right, well, it's papers first. Even as you've got these totalitarian sort of religious fanatics coming for these people, it's still, no, papers first. So you can at least try and get these scraps of sort of moral insight into the government's decision making, even while he tries to obfuscate on all the other matters.
Even though that Raab himself in a crisis would be like Billy Zane in Titanic. just like
Billy Zane in
climbing
any film.
over children. Ian, finally, some good news. Former commando Pen Farthing has been evacuating animals from his Nowzad dogs charity. Initially, his private charter plane was blocked by the government, with Defence Secretary Ben Wallace saying that he was not going to prioritise pets over people. The monster. Wallace also accused Farthing supporters of intimidating his staff, and the Sunday Times published a threatening voicemail left by Farthing for one of Wallace's aides. What do you make of Mr. Penn?
Not much, man. Not much. I found this whole story, there were certain days where I could just barely look at it because I thought I was going to get so angry I was going to start bursting my skin. It was just so deeply upsetting to me. And it's a relationship between him and his supporters, which is completely in sync. He knows the degree of outrage there is and push over animals. And he utilised it. He utilised it for a reason you can't hold against him for trying to get him and his staff and his animals out. Although when it came down to those 3 groups and only 2 could get through, you notice how quickly the staff were the ones that got sacrificed. And how did he manage to do that? By a bunch of people sitting here. There's no point like, I'm not gonna. I've been given more shit about this than I have for most other subjects on Twitter, including from lots of people who I apparently would normally agree with, given what seems to be on their bios. But like, there's no point like beating around the bush. Like, they demonstrably care more about dogs than you do about brown people. I can't see any other basis upon which how someone could come to the conclusions that they've come to here. There is a real limit to the capacity and the resources and the attention that can be given to getting evacuees out. Now, because of the pressure that was dedicated towards cats and dogs instead of the brown people who could have gotten out, if indeed we gave the remotest fuck about them, the whole thing seemed to be a spectacle of just the very worst, most sentimental and most sort of morally corrupted aspects of the British personality. And to end this period, I mean, it's been a bad few weeks anyway. It's been some of the worst weeks that we've seen in some time. To end it with that story just felt like the last smear on our character as we evacuated from Afghanistan. I don't have anything nice to say about it at all. Sorry, just complete outrage and disdain.
That's fine. It's good to end there. I have no follow up. I was going to say, do you feel anything other than complete outrage and disdain? You've already answered that question. Right. Ian, last one for you. There's a lot of current public sympathy for Afghan refugees as the government is trying to pass the Nationality and Borders Bill. Do you think that's going to influence, the public opinion will influence that at all? Or are they banking on the fact that actually the public have quite short memories?
Yeah, I think that they'll just push on regardless. I mean, it will be the main thing that people like me and, the Labour MPs criticising in Parliament, I think, will raise against it. This is the future Afghans. But you can tell how little of a fuck they give by looking at the Home Office's fact sheet on asylum, on Afghans trying to come in through ARAP, which is basically, for people who've worked for the UK or British nationals, and through the resettlement program. You look at that fact sheet, and in the fact sheet, it says, look, if you try and come in irregularly, that means basically not using one of our official programs, i.e. not waiting 5 years before we take another 5,000. If you try to come in on a boat, we will criminalise you according to the provisions of the Nationalities Bill. That's what that bill does. It says if you turn up irregularly, we'll criminalise you. If you turn up from a third country, as anyone from Afghanistan will, they're clearly going to have to go somewhere like Pakistan first. And then we will treat you as a secondary category of asylum seeker, where even if your refugee claim is upheld, in that period, we can put you in punishment accommodation, we can put you in offshore detention, we can prevent you from being reunited with your family, we can prevent you from claiming public funds. And then even if you get your fucking refugee status, every 30 months, we can try and remove you again over and over and over, year after year after year, trapping you in this kind of half-life. So, I mean, they're clear themselves right now, even when we're at the heart, of this little moment, this window where people seem to give a shit about refugees. Even now, stamped right onto the fact sheet, they're saying, yeah, we're going to press ahead with this. And for those Afghans who try to come in regularly, we're going to try and make their lives very miserable indeed. So I wouldn't expect any U-turns.
What if they're cats, dogs or alpacas?
Well, then just come right in because the British people are such a compassionate, big-hearted nation.